Yaron, we're so pleased to have you today. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and what made you interested in art.
Okay. So I have been drawing since I can remember. I've always been an artist and been interested in art. I was a self-taught artist. I never got any lessons or any classes or anything like that. It was just something that I was self-motivated to do. I never really received any encouragement, and I think that kind of strengthened me as an artist and kind of pushed me to make these my artistic dreams come true. When I first started, since I was self-taught, I really didn't know nothing about other mediums except for pencils. It seemed like the obvious medium for an artist to me, and so I drew. And I was very interested in realistic, photorealistic drawing. So I would use the thinnest pencil that I could find, a mechanical pencil, and I would even get into the tooth and the grooves of the paper, and I wanted to almost replicate reality as closely as possible with these pencil drawings. That was what originally motivated me, because I thought, of course, the better I am at replicating reality and of drawing, the better artist I am. I was very naive in a way. I did this for a good 8-10 years or so, and then decided, so like every time I would go to a gallery or a museum, especially at contemporary art, I felt like, I don't even understand what's happening over here. Because what did I know except for my drawings? I'm like, Yaron, the human printer. And then...
And around what age were you when you started drawing?
Oh, I mean, drawing with a pencil, that was when,
yeah.
I would say I was probably 20, 21.
Okay.
So I decided to go to art school, I thought that might help me, and it was a great experience. I thought when I first went that I would go in and it would make me a better drawer. That was my intention when I first came in. And I was the only person accepted into my program who didn't have an art background, so I thought that was pretty cool. So I got into this program, and when I arrived, I was just telling you when that I was surrounded by performance artists and video artists and contemporary art that I had no clue about. I was really kind of lost in a way. I thought that my drawings would give me a kind of this street cred that I could draw, and it seemed like very few of the folks there could draw or even interested in drawing. And I was very stubborn and kind of stuck to my drawings and tried to experiment with different ways of drawing. I guess they were kind of surrealistic drawings, and I was drawing what are these drawings called again, where you could only see them from a certain angle?
Optical.
Anamorphic images.
Oh.
So I would, my version of postmodern drawing when I first arrived in art school was to make drawings where you could see a portrait of somebody, but you could only see the nose from this angle and only the eyes from this angle. So it was very kind of abstract in a way, but as you walked around, you'd be able to experience it.
That's really cool.
I thought so, until I was brutally ripped to shreds by the critique process, which was one of the best things that happened to me. Because what I ended up learning from art school, despite what I thought I would learn, which was to be a better drawer, was to experiment and how to make bad drawings. That was the greatest lesson that I could have learned from that experience. I kind of lightened up on the stubbornness a little bit. I started to make bad drawings. I taught myself how to draw all over again in a looser way. And what I learned was that if I made if I chose a medium and made one kind of okay drawing and just made another one and another one and another one, maybe the 20th drawing still was terrible, but the 21st would be amazing maybe. If you just kept at it, and once I lost the sense that drawings were precious and had to be just so carefully laid out, it made me into a better artist. And that's something that was my takeaway from art school. Experiment and be fearless. And don't be ashamed of something that isn't good, because eventually it will get better.
Do you find that your background of not from the art-specific field affects your art?
So that's very interesting. before I got into art school, I went to art school when I was 32 years old, and before that I had a whole other life where I was a high school guidance counselor in Brooklyn for at-risk youth. I was in a tough neighborhood and dealt with a lot of gang members and a rough crowd. And when I went to art school, I remember speaking to one of my professors, and he asked me, you're not just 21 years old over here. What is you have a history of some kind? And I remember telling him, oh, I was a high school guidance counselor. That has nothing to do with my art. And he said, I think that we'll find that there has more to do with art than you might think, because I am a portraitist. I come from this kind of a humanist background, and very interested in studying humans, especially when I draw people. You have to observe, and you have to look at them and try to capture not just their appearance, but also their soul. And it's helped me quite a bit. This is kind of like a good segue to kind of like the beginnings of what led to the project we're going to be showing.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is that when I was, I went back to my career after art school. And I don't know what things about.
Absolutely.
But I was, the art it didn't leave me. It was ever present. And when I had spare time, with maybe some guidance counselors play basketball with kids or do whatever, or sing with them, I was the art guy. And we would sit around the office, and I had drawing circles. I started a doodle club. There was a mural club. We had fusion murals all over Brooklyn because of that. And one of the things that I started playing around with, and this is connected to a lesson that I learned from art school, was just, let me see what I can, it was like not having much in the kitchen, and let me see if I can make a meal over here. And I had office supplies, and I had Sharpie markers, and I had whiteout. And I was not quite a painter just yet. This was kind of how I got into painting, and that was through the use of whiteout. And I would sit with the students, and I would make portraits of them, just for fun. And by the time I was done with my career, I had well over 100 portraits all over the office of the students. So I started exploring this medium because the images started getting better and better and more interesting to me. Of course, they started off not too good, but who cares, right?
It's not the point, right?
Right, it's about the making of it. And anyway, so I started to discover kind of like these several things. One was about the drawing of people, because I wasn't drawing from a photograph, I was drawing from real life, and also about the medium that I was using. So in terms of drawing people, I started having really interesting reactions from the students. Some of them, drawing takes like half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, depending on the drawing. And some of these students had never been looked at before. And they would tell me that, wow, you're looking at me. No one's ever sat and looked at me for half an hour, straight on. Some students I had students burst into tears. I had students I've known them for 2 years already, and now they're starting to reveal their deepest and darkest secrets to me. I heard some really raw personal histories from people while I was drawing them. And I was like, wow, I'm just sitting here, half listening, and I'm drawing them, and that was a very powerful experience for me. In addition to that, in terms of exploring this medium, black and white out, simple, right? You're drawing, and then you're maybe correcting things. But the whiteout wasn't so much a correcting medium so much anymore, as much as it became a paint-oriented medium. And what I started to realize was that, everybody knows you've got the little whiteout container. It stinks. When you first start using it and you want to correct something, it's so watery. It's not even covering up your mark. Later on, it gets so crusty and thick, and now it's ugly, and it kind of like it also is not quite what you want it to do in terms of its function of whitening out a mistake. And I started to use the various stages. I always had like 3 or 4 whiteouts at various stages of, I guess, of this change that takes place. I guess it kind of evaporates, and that's what smell is. So if I wanted to create a kind of thin glaze over the marker, I could use a very new one. If I wanted a thick impasto, I'd use my oldest one. And so this started to turn into an art, and nobody else was doing this. I'd never seen it before. I've looked, and the deeper I got into it, the better I got at it. And I can show you some of the images that I made at the time. So this is one of my students. These are just, they're very spontaneous drawings. I mean, you can still see some of the initial lines over here that I made, and here are just some rough areas over here. Some of the kids never even finished sitting. They were just, I mean, they're excited kids. They're all over the place.
Right.
So I had to work very quickly. It really was kind of like a portraiture boot camp for me, because I could already draw faces, but
right.
Can you sit and draw it very quickly? I think it was, I think Delacroix had said that if you're a real artist, you'll be able to draw someone a woman who falls out of a building, 4 stories, out of a 4-story building, and before she hits the ground, you'll be able to draw her.
Really?
And if that's the case, I'm not a real artist, but I learned how to draw very quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
So here's another one.
Wow.
So you can see over here some of the thinner, this is relatively thin over here, I'd say. This is thin, this is a watery mark, and this is kind of like a thicker one that I kind of scrubbed in over here.
Right. The texture is so, you feel it. You can feel the texture just from looking at it. And it's interesting, in each one of your drawings and of their faces, their hands are always touching their face.
Yeah.
Is that something
I love hands, yeah.
was that something that you prompted, or they just naturally took on those poses?
I always wanted to include a hand if I could.
Okay.
That wasn't always necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love hands. They're very expressive. They're expressive faces. This is an unfinished drawing. The kid just got up and left. Just to show you, just what it looks like underneath. Just these thick marks. And here's a very watery looking beginning to a drawing. And, I got one more. So I've got multiple volumes of this. This is a student. This was towards the end of, this was like the last day of school, I remember, and I was just so into, I was making like 6 or 7 of these a day, and this was just effortless, this one. So I loved doing this so much. I remember I was just sitting with my girlfriend, and I was talking to her, and I was saying, my God, this was right after the 2012 election, and I was thinking, we really got to see a portrait of the country through that election, just how divided the country was. And you hear from the news, the news is telling us this is what the country is. The country's divided in this way. And I thought, gosh, it just can't be that simple. I feel like if I just took a trip around the country, and if I met these people, I'd have a very different experience, a more human experience, and I'd be able to connect to them in some kind of interesting way. And she said, she's a film producer, so she said, we can do that. Because to me, that was just some pie in the sky idea, I was ready to forget about it. And we did. We planned for it, we crowdsourced it, we got into our car, and she filmed it, and we ended up traveling 6 weeks around the entire country, and I drew well over 100 portraits of people from all walks of life. And I have an example of that also. This is just one of the volumes. This is a fellow down in New Orleans. So as you can see, I had a little more time. This guy actually wanted to sit for it. These are richer drawings, still, I think, than the ones that I did with my students.
But same medium.
Same medium. This is Dr. Bob, an artist in New Orleans. He's a real character.
And did you capture their stories as you were drawing?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Captured on film.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also, just hearing everybody's, again, what I knew already before I even start of the trip was that if I sit with people and if I give them my full attention, they are going to have a response. I mean, you think of, we were just talking about performance art before, and Marina Abramovich had her whole staring performance piece.
Right.
And people she had reactions, she was tearing up.
Yeah.
And they were having these profound experiences, and they were lined up around the block, it seemed, in order just to sit and stare into this woman's eyes. And so I kind of went with that knowledge. This was a trip of goodwill, but also a soul-searching trip, where I was going to look into people's eyes and kind of draw as much as I could, pun intended, I guess, out of them. And
Well, so I wonder, do you think staring into someone's eyes is always a powerful connection, and something that brings a powerful connection between two people? I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on technology in terms of distancing or bringing us together, and the choice to make sacrifice be a kind of a digital piece to some degree, and yet your work is so much about that, being in the physical same space, occupying the same space as another person.
Okay, that is, what else? I mean, first, just in terms of, this has this kind of like very old world style to it, but let's keep in mind I'm using very kind of like 20th century mediums here.
Right.
Marker and whiteout is relatively new. But then in terms of, I mean, when I made Sacrifice, I'm very aware of kind of encroachment of digital and computer and robotic technology on our lives. I mean, there is we live in the age of like the perfect vacuum seal, of nanotechnology. They're building things from the atom up. Even our buttons aren't mechanical anymore. I mean, I use my iPhone, and it's not even a button; it's the idea of a button.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's so true.
It's kind of claustrophobic. When I think of my my philosophy readings, I think of Hegel, who would talk about pure spirit, and that's where art was headed. And in a way, I think he'd smile if he thought for a moment about buttons that aren't even mechanical anymore. They're just the idea of a button, and they even make a clicking sound. We have like these chimpanzee ears that want to hear the click, but it's not. Don't fool yourself. It's just a matter of maybe it's the heat of your finger that's making this happen. So as I'm making these drawings, especially when I worked on Sacrifice, I felt like I know that I'm going to make a scan in 2 minutes as I'm making this drawing. I also know that as I'm sitting there scratching away, I mean, this is what people were doing 50,000 years ago in caves, or whatever they were working on that we don't have evidence of. This is as basic and primal as you can get, and we are losing it, maybe. Everything is so high definition, but I feel very powerful in a way, because I feel that I can do something that I know a machine can't do. We can have a self-driving car, but the self-driving car can't joyride and do donuts and do whatever crazy things people do with them. That's me if I want to do that on a piece of paper.
Yes.
So as I was, I'm scanning it. Not every scan was perfect. That was kind of annoying.
Well, maybe, talk about the process of making Sacrifice. So it was every 2 minutes you took a scan of
Well, let me see this a second. Okay, so in terms of how Sacrifice was created, I had no clue originally how I was actually going to do it.
Okay.
I actually wasn't even familiar with William Kentridge, whose work somewhat is similar to it. And I was, because I was thinking, I was looking at just different ways of creating animation. I was thinking of using a camera, getting the lighting right, and I just knew that someone suggested a scanner, and that was just the defining idea for Sacrifice for me. So do you mean in terms of the technology of it, or just how I conceived of it, or?
Both, I think. Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I could almost like tell kind of like the story of it.
Sure,
just
sure.
for your, this was part of a collaborative art project where they got 4 artists together, 2 visual, 2 performance. We were given a theme, being sacrifice, and we were supposed to, this is from the Silver Lake in JCC, and it was a funded program. It was a grant, I forget what it's called. It's not the smartest thing to and we were given a theme, and we were supposed to work together to create a kind of unified collaborative project that was going to be exhibited. And so I chose to make an animation piece. I could have really done anything. I could have made paintings or you name it, but I wanted to push myself.
Okay.
I found that every time that I push myself and enter uncharted waters, something interesting is going to happen.
Had you done an animation before?
No,
So it's
The first one.
Sacrifice is my first animation.
Wow, that's amazing.
Uh,
Quite the first attempt. That's
Yeah,
it.
right.
No, it really.
It was satisfying. So the first thing that I had to think of was I had to create a narrative, and I was interested in one of the most basic stories of sacrifice that I know of, which is that of Abraham and Isaac. God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son to prove his devotion, and he's about to do it, and an angel comes from the heavens and pulls his hand away. He said there's a ram stuck in a thicket, and he says, choose this ram instead. And I'm sure there's some meaning behind it. I don't know if it's instructive, don't sacrifice your kids. That was my parents. But I always thought, as I was conceiving of this, of how I was going to illustrate this, because I wasn't just going to tell it as an illustration, or just like a head-on story. I thought, when I think of sacrifice, it's not like a little part is left afterwards. Sacrifice means when something is completely destroyed, when there's a total negation of an object or of something. And when I was creating the theme for this, instead of just ending it with the nice little story that we have in the Bible, use the ram instead, I thought, well, now let's pivot a little bit and start focusing on what happens to this creature that is actually sacrificed. Where, as you'll see in the animation piece, there is a total sacrifice of the creature